Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I want to thank you all for coming to this special edition of Java with Joe. Normally it's every fourth Thursday of the month, but we're doing something special for a special event. So Mr. Bob Bialkowski is here today, and he is going to talk about Batavia's famous rocket car and how it ended up recently at the Buffalo Transportation Museum, the Pierce Arrow Museum, as it's also known. So, Bob, take it away.
Thank you. First, I'm going to ask everyone to hold your questions, comments, and all that till we're all done. Otherwise, I found that questions can sidetrack everybody to a different area, and then everybody just starts sitting around, gets up, starts talking. First, we're going to go through this little PowerPoint, and this is from the Pierce Arrow Museum, and that's basically the way the rocket car looked when they had a presentation. They had like a grand opening for the car, and if anyone, there's one slide in here of the car sitting in front of a house, and if anyone knows where that house is, please let me know, because it's either on Dellinger or Thomas or Porter. It's not on Ellicott Avenue. Okay, these are some patent drawings that they had. You can see all the different figures. And for some reason, this is, there we go. Okay, wow. Looks pretty wild, doesn't it? Now, this is the house it was sitting in front of. And when Charles Thomas built this, he lived with his parents, and that was at 3 Ellicott Avenue. 3 Ellicott Avenue is long gone. It doesn't exist. It's where Dunn Tire is. And they rented a garage out and back, and that's where they built it in the garage. So 1 and 3, those first couple of addresses are gone. All right, this is the picture. This is the picture I was telling you about. I haven't been able to find this house, but I'm sure it's still there, and somebody would know where it's at. Okay, you can see in these pictures there's several variations to the vehicle, to the front end, and it was a work in progress. There's the registration. Weight, 2480, $12.50.
Yeah.
Really. And there's the dapper man inside. You can see it was state-of-the-art instrument panel. And one of the things, if you notice, the clutch and the brake pedal are suspended from under the dash. And during the time frame that was built, everything was through the floor. You know, so it's pretty advanced. It gave you more room. I mean, anyone that's ever driven an old vehicle, you have to, when you get in, you have to make sure you don't hook your pant leg on the clutch pedal, whatever.
Wow. Thank you, sir.
This is my favorite picture, being in aviation. I love this picture. And state-of-the-art DC-3 and the Thomas rocket car. And the pretty gal in the uniform of the day. Believe it or not, stewardess uniforms, the old uniforms are extremely rare, if not totally gone. A friend of mine's wife is a flight attendant. She gave me some old uniforms. I donated them to the Experimental Aircraft Association out in Oshkosh. They were thrilled. It took me about 2 months to get them out there reasonable, because she just put them all in a big bag, and it was 45 pounds. And with today's shipping costs, so I ended up giving them to a friend of mine, and he gave them to a friend of his, and then he went over and lowered them in an airplane in Niagara Falls, and they went out for the annual air show. was there's several thousand airplanes. And I had everything printed on paper in the bags. Girl picked them up and I just mailed out the release forms, turning them over to them. But the men's uniforms, there was very little variation, but woman flight attendant, female, I mean, even today, they change them every year and a half, 2 years, so a lot of the early ones with the hats are totally extinct. How's that? Looks official, doesn't it? And you can see from the outside, there's very little objects sticking out of the vehicle. The chrome was basic, trunk handle. Now, it's really important. Look at the back windows. Try backing this car up. You know when you think about it. And anyone that remembers the cars from the 40s, when you backed up, you had to almost drive by sound. Well, that's far enough. It's really important to look at this. So this guy was just a genius. He thought of everything. See that in the top of the car, that little fairing? That was today's backup camera. There was a periscope in there. You just look in the periscope and you can see where you can back up. I have no idea where that is. Build the car, it takes 3 years.
My father took that picture. My father, Walter Wyman.
Did he?
Took that picture? Yeah,
Wow.
and 2 other pictures on colored slide film.
Now, when they first came to Batavia, you could see it in the background of this picture. This is important. Most people would have, actually the first time I saw this car, Mr. Dick McClurk's with us, he was the one that had the dream to restore it all. I looked at it and said, this is going to end up right back in the scrap heap. It was half scrapped anyway when he got it. Wow. You can see where they cut through the front. They're wheeling it out of the barn, a nice blackboard, I believe. Wasn't much to it. Nice cut in it, huh? Right through the front. Everything was pretty much stripped out of it. You might see some local people in the picture you recognize. What a motley crew, huh? They're all standing there like, I know what they're thinking. Now what? We haven't loaded, now what? Yeah, Ken, don't stick your head in there. Try a big wasp nest. And these are some other things that, the aqua cheetah. Okay, they have quite a few Playboys at the Pierce Arrow Museum. Charles Thomas went on to work for the company. And it was a cute little 2-seater of the day. And today, how many cars are like that? There's still a lot of them out there. History repeats itself, there's no doubt about it. And this is where it's sitting right now amongst the contemporaries of the day. Okay, well, I'm not here today to talk about the mechanics of the automobile and what it had or didn't have, and how many cubic inches the engine is and all that. But this is some of the same comments I gave in Buffalo. And it starts out, great people accomplish noteworthy feats. There's a lot of great people out there. It might be the guy down the street that's always in his garage tinkering. It might be somebody at home on their computer. For our friends and neighbors, they have dreams and they do things. Unfortunately, a lot of great people come up with a lot of great ideas, and somebody that's a lot more of a business aptitude seems to steal them away. I've known several people like that. They said, gee, how did he get all this? Well, they wrote out a check for $1,000 and bought all the rights and told the guy, that'll never work, but I'll give you $1,000, thank you. It happens a lot. It takes men and women with a vision, determination, and tenacity to accomplish major goals. It really takes a lot of tenacity. Our small city of Batavia was once an industrial giant like Buffalo and many other cities. We're the birthplace of Western New York. All the land from Rochester to Buffalo, from Lake Ontario, and Erie, south to Pennsylvania. A huge block of land. It was all divvied up, parceled out, sold right from this building here. Pretty amazing when you think about it. Joseph Ellicott, he managed the company. That's why there's so many things named after him.
I'm sorry, I really came.
Yeah, and it was also the home of Dean Richmond, who was the second president of the New York City Railroad, and a lot of other people. We were once the home to Massey Harris, one of the largest manufacturers of farm equipment in the world. We had numerous other factories, and thank goodness a few still remain with us. All these companies had one thing in common. Their founders were people with vision, determination, and tenacity. They stuck to their ideas and forged on, no matter how difficult it was. Week and a half ago, Graham Manufacturing had a shovel turning for a new building they're putting up, and most of us elected officials from the local area were invited to attend. It was pretty impressive. Rob Hausnick went with me. He retired from Graham's, and I asked him to go. And it was pretty educational. Asked the question, how many people do you employ now? Right now they're employing about 500 people, right here in Batavia. And they own another company in Colorado. The president, I think he lives in Colorado, was here for both companies. There's a lot going on, and the Congressperson Tenney was there, and she was quite familiar. Her ex-husband was a submarine officer, and she's actually been out on the submarine. And we had the good fortune to be able, some of us, to go through the Navy building where they do a lot of assembly there. And of course, it's all classified, but it's mainly just a clean room where they don't want anybody in there that could tamper with anything, that's for sure. But in the assembly building, I asked the gentleman, I said, I see you have railroad tracks in here. Is this where you load the heat transfer units, heat exchange units? He says, actually, we had one so big, we built it on a rail car. He said it weighed 400 tons. So think about it. They're a major manufacturer, a lot of stuff coming and going. It's an old company, local, started here. Sometimes we don't realize what we have in our own backyard. Well, Charles Thomas was one of them. He was a dreamer. He had an idea. He went and built that car. Way ahead of its time. Independent suspension. Built it in 37, 38. Had that backup mirror. Huge back seat. It was just quite an automobile. He took it out to Detroit, showed it to the people, took it to GM. Problem was, 1943, everybody had piles of blueprints on their order desk, in the US government. Everybody knew we were going into a war, and people might have been interested, but there was no thank you. So he come back, brought it back home. After the wars, Mrs. Thomas said, you know, we could use a good family car. What we're driving isn't very good. And we met his children, the Thomas, they're not children anymore, Thomas offspring, and the guy says, yeah, that was our family car. We went, got groceries, went everywhere, sat out in the driveway, and they drove it for quite a few years until it reached the end of its life and ended up in the sad shape you saw. Now, today I want to talk about two men associated with the rocket car. One of them is amongst us, Mr. Dick McClure. And Dick owns Old World Collision. He started the restoration in 2015, and he labored on with it till 2013. The car was the vision initially of Mr. Moore. He lived in Alva, and then he ended up out in Michigan. And he kind of kept it going. And then it just sort of started stalling a little. They had a lot of local people involved, a lot of investors. And Dick was working on it when he could, and when he could get resources and get funding and all that. The first time I saw the car over at Dick's, I'd never seen such a disaster. I mean, I never thought anybody would try even restoring anything like that. And I told Dick, I said it earlier, that I thought it should just end up going back to the scrapyard. But as word of his existence spread, enthusiasts from all over the county began to stop and visit. Dick always dropped everything in the shop and gave tours. Hey, come on, I'll show you what's going on. And, you know, I talked to him about it, and I said, Dick, you know, that thing's just becoming it's taking all your resources just to give tours and all that. So Dick knew that, so he was put in a bad position where he had to make a decision. So he did. He went and got some rocking chairs. Put them in the front. So instead of spending all his time on his feet, he could sit down and tell you all about it. Well, the driving force, Mr. Moore died a couple of years ago, and the restoration started to slow down, and a new problem really sprang up. Where would the rocket car go? But a lot of people helped Dick. Dick had it about probably 75% complete. And I just want to, some of you might know some of these people, and they contributed a lot of work. And there may be others that I don't know, but Dick gave me this list. There was a Bruce Seelaw, Rich Staba, Rob Halsnick was here, Bill Gurich, Brian Schrader, Charles Rubel, Mike Cleveland, Dan Mattice. Dan did a lot of the welding, Josh Quick, and the Rochester Street and Rod Club. So there was a lot of local volunteers and efforts and hours spent. Well, Dick and I talked about it quite a bit. He said, we have to find a place for the car. Well, where? So he said, well, I think the city's working on it. I'm an elected official. Without getting into politics, I will bring up a few things. Sam was on council with me. Politicians are fickle at best. They really are. Not maybe because they always want to be, but when you're elected, ideally you represent the majority of the people. And that majority, what they want can change with time, like the wind. So they can promise you something today, and 2 years later, sorry, tough. So Dick had talked to the city manager and the Chamber of Commerce, and Holland Land Office here. Holland Land Office would really have no place to put the car. We even discussed once, I said, maybe get an old storage unit, and put windows in it, and set it up where we could drop it off someplace and it'd be all enclosed. And I told him, I said, the mall would be a horrible place. Within 3 days it'd be all graffiti. Yes. Then the next thing you know, the crowbars would come out. It'd be vandalized. So that's what happened. Unfortunately, like a lot of things, you lose your own community history. But this is where Mr. Sandoro from the Pierce Earl Museum entered in. About a year ago, the car was sent up there, put under his watch, and it was completed. And he provided the best home in the world for the rocket car. It really is. Dick was very upset, and he just hated to see it leave. But I talked to him many times, and I did tell him, I said, Dick, the cars has a good home now. More people from other parts of the country that live in Batavia know about the rocket car. And Dick used to get visitors from here and there. How did you know? Oh, I'm a car enthusiast. I heard all about it. So it's in a great home. Sits in front of the Frank Lloyd Wright concept fueling station, surrounded by cars of the time, and it's in a great place. Pierce Arrows, Playboy's gas station, and Mr. Thomas's siblings were very excited to see it there. They were just thrilled. So people from all over the world can see it. And Mr. Sandoro figured out a way, it's all in a trust, everything's in a trust, but he figured out a way to get around things. A couple of years ago, he had a Pierce Arrow convention in Buffalo. And he brought it up. He said, dealing with these politicians, now they won't close the streets. We're going to have another one. He says, then I'm having a real problem. I can't get them to agree to close the streets. Gee, what a surprise. Fickle politicians, you think? Yeah, you did it 2 years ago, and now it's on to something else. Let's go wreck something else. And so he said, well, the only thing I can do, we're in this block, I own all this. The other side of the street, I own all those buildings. That's where the restoration shop is. So I bought the rest of the block behind me. Now we don't have a problem. We have plenty of parking and plenty of place to show the cars. So here's a man with vision working around the local politics. And he does have the city tied into the trust with the museum. So, and I can only tell people, and I know history in Batavia, our history's been decimated. Urban renewal, it was a lot more than urban renewal. There was a lot of local people too, saw a chance to make a quick buck. And buildings were torn down, some buildings could have been saved, some should have been saved. I mean, as recently as a couple of years ago, the Thomas Coal Company leased the office building with the red tile roof. That was a beautiful building that should have been saved. And, I've been informed that people were told, well, if you guys pursue this, we'll just eliminate the Historic Preservation Board. And I would say to people, if you see something like this, come to whatever agency, the city, the county, and scream your head up and speak. And look at your elected officials. You want results, you look them right in the eye and say, sir, ma'am, you go ahead and do this. Against the will of the people, you won't be sitting here the next term. That always gets people. So a lot of people are just in it to get reelected. And it's important to speak up. And we have council meetings. There's issues there. Not a single person there. The press. That's it. But the next day, my phone will be ringing. Why didn't you speak up? And for some reason in Batavia, there's this fear that if you speak up, they will get you. Whatever the day is, I don't know. But, oh well. That's the life of politics. There's a lot we can learn from our local history. As a child, I learned something. My dad took me down to Massey Harris, showed me all around. And I see all these guys are out front carrying signs that are on strike. And my dad was always, he worked at Dollar's, but he didn't like strikes. He didn't like a lot of things. And he says, this isn't going to accomplish anything. He says, they want more money, they want this, they want that, and they're carrying their signs. And I said, well, why not? I was just a little guy. He says, come on, we drive around the back of the factory. Here's all these rail cars in the buildings. Get out, walk over, look through the doors. He said, see all that? It's all the machines to make the farm equipment. It's all being loaded on rail cars. We go over to another rail area. See that? They're loading all the projects on the cars. He says, while they're out front striking, everything's going out the back door to Canada. And that's what happened, you know, and unfortunately, the buildings have all fallen apart. A lot of it's gone now, so. There's a lot of that. We've lost a lot here to foreign countries, you know. Televisions, I don't think there's a television made in the US anymore. Radios, technology, unfortunately, can change pretty rapidly. You know, today, you can, it's amazing. I went to a conference years ago, and the man there, he works for the top 10 companies in the United States. You know, he's a consultant, and he had a nice PowerPoint show, and he says, I invent things, and I look at things, and I take their inventions home, and I ponder them. And he showed us this little robot he had, and he designed it and built it. And the robot would go to the door, get the paper, the robot would go get his coffee, would do all these things. He says, and this was probably 20 years ago. He says, but the thing is, I don't think the world's ready for it. Now, the first copy machines were invented in 1947. 1947. Today, everybody has one in their home if they have any kind of need for it. 1947, they couldn't sell them. They couldn't sell them. In the 50s, all the big companies said, well, what will we do with our typing pool? We have all these people. We'd have to fire them. We can't do that today. I mean, today it's gone. You know, you'd be gone in a heartbeat. But you think about it. Steam engines. Little story, when I was a young fellow, Dollars used to have a picnic every year at Crystal Beach. And I grew up in South Jackson. We'd walk down to the New York Central Station, take the train, go to Buffalo, get out, walk down the dock, get in the Canadiana, go over to Crystal Beach, come back. You know, steam engine, the old green Pullman cars, they always locked the heads, the toilets when you went through a city or village. And I remember my cousin and I going in the head after they unlocked it. We're standing there flushing the toilet, looking at the tracks going beneath us and all that. Well, one day we went out on a steam engine and got there. We got back that night, got to the railroad barns, and there was this beautiful brand new train, diesel engine, and all the cars were silver, and we were going on. I said, boy, I wonder where that's going. That was our ride home. I couldn't believe it. So one day we went from steam to diesel. So today we see technology change overnight at times. It's just unbelievable. E-bikes. Every place you look, there's e-bikes now. Yeah, great thing for a lot of people. So other people, it's a disaster. So that's how we got to where we are today. And I think this is pretty exciting. I think we can learn a lot just from this one man with one invention. Thank goodness it has a home right near here. I would like to tell everyone, if you have an opportunity, go up there, spend a few hours, visit. You'll learn a lot. It's pretty exciting. So, okay, any questions?
Wow.
What is the motor transmission? I'm assuming it was built by GM for.
Dick, you put the motor in, you and your friends.
The motor that's in it now is what was in it when we got it. By that I mean it's a different engine, but I believe it was a 1937 Ford flathead. That's what Thomas powered it with, and a 3-speed transmission. But he had taken the shifter. It didn't come up, as Bob was saying, it didn't come up in the floor because he wanted more room. He took the shifter where he put the motor in, measured it just right, turned it around so it faced forward. Yeah, it was up in the engine compartment, and then he hooked a rod to it through the dashboard, and you shifted on the dashboard so that it wasn't on the floor, gave you more room and everything. But it was still the 3-speed, transmission right there. He just turned it around. He was an out-of-the-box thinker. I wish I could have met him.
Who named it the rocket car?
I have no idea.
I asked a lot of people about that. Apparently, obviously, it looks like a helmet. okay? And Buck Rogers, I don't know whenever that came out, was popular, what, 38 or 40, something like that. And I think that's how the two got meshed, but,
And did he call it the rocket car at that time too, or not?
Oh, yeah, you could see on the ads.
huh?
On the ads, when they had it displayed, it was the rocket car.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was the rocket car right from the beginnings.
The one picture you had up there where you go, I don't know where that was or whatever, when he couldn't sell the car, he was a good, idea man, period. But he used to rent it out to different dealerships, even in the 50s, to have, when the new cars came out, that would be the draw to get people in, because that was a car of the future. So he still made money with it, even though he couldn't get it off the ground and have it produced.
Well, if you go up there, you'd be surprised. It's something to see.
When it came out of storage and came back to Batavia for restoration, where was it stored at and who owned it? For how many years was it there?
I wish I could remember the guy that owned it. He was a Chevy collector from Lockport. And he bought it, or found it, or whatever, in some field around Albion or around there or whatever. And he got it, and he had it in his barn with other cars. He shopped it to Jay Leno, and he shopped it around, he was gonna sell it, but nobody ever wanted it. And then Dick Moore rapped on his door enough to where we did get it.
Yeah, I think where he found it, what I was told, was they were in the process of scrapping it.
Yeah,
That's how it got cut up. And somebody called this guy and said, I don't know, we have something weird here. You gotta come down and look at it. And they weren't exactly sure what they were cutting up, so that's how close it was to being 6 cents a pound.
Dick told me about it years ago, that we had a field someplace, and he never said where it was, but he knew, and then he sold it to the guy. I think that guy had like a stamp and coin collection business that fell in Lockport.
Okay.
But I can't remember his name either, I know it, I can't think of it.
Sorry, you know.
Now, do they have disc brakes or drum brakes?
They had drummers, didn't they?
Dick, if I remember correctly, the car was rescued out of a junkyard
Well,
where they had, right at the point where they had the torch ready to cut it up,
yeah.
and the front left fender,
They'd
you
already-
saw in the picture, it had like, well, it was like burned off, partially burned
Yeah,
off.
they started to cut the car off.
And that happened in the junkyard
Yeah.
just before it got rescued.
Yeah, there's some amazing things about this vehicle. It was definitely ahead of its time. It had no axles. Yeah, each wheel was independent. It had single roller bearing arms. The frame was one solid piece of metal, all welded. Guess what? It had a separate brake system, front and rear brakes. In 1937, 38, when it was put together, it had dual brakes. How many years ago did we get it?
67.
There you go. The gear shift, which Dick mentioned. One of the coolest things it says here was that if a tire popped, the car didn't need a spare to keep driving. It could balance itself out, stay on 3 wheels. And there were some witnesses that did say they saw him driving it around town with one wheel off.
Oh, my God.
80 horsepower and got 15 miles to the gallon. The car apparently had a great ride. The passengers didn't notice any bumps or anything if they went over it. It was pretty soft to ride in. And it was built for the super highways of tomorrow. They were building it for unlimited speed on highways. And they designed the car to get up to 80 miles an hour. And this is what cars, 50 miles an hour. And I remember when Barney Oldfield, he hit 60 miles an hour, and the doctors at the time said, a human body can't travel that fast. It'll definitely die, So, I mean, it was just way ahead of its time. And Dick Moore, Dick was from Elba. He had quite a collection of cars and all that. And I remember one day I ran into Dick at Tops and I says, Dick, you're driving the old Rolls Royce there and you park it right with all the cars. Aren't you worried about it getting dinged? He said, I'll give you some advice. If you have a nice car, don't park it off on the side of the parking lot all on its own. They guarantee somebody's going to pull in that far from it to look out the window at it. And then they'll open the door and hit your car, and now you're going to get a nice dent. He says, park it with all the other cars. And that's what he always did, you know, Dick was quite a character. So,
Makes sense, yeah.
well, it was pretty exciting. I was honored to be able to go up there and to the museum. I was honored to meet the Thomas siblings, very nice people. They were just so excited about this whole thing. It was just quite a thing to thank people of vision like Dick to stick with it all these years. Dick?
I just want to share two things with you. And I got this from his kids. All the time that I was working on it. I wish I could have met him. Because I guess at 19 years old, he was in the General Motors Pontiac Division Design School and with the rest of the kids in the class. And that day, their assignment was to put colors together for two-toning cars. And so they all got their pencils out and they're doing the colors. And the teacher walked up the aisle and walked by Thomas and stopped, turned around, and he looked at Charlie in front of the whole class. I said, Charlie, Mr. Thomas, what is it you think you're doing? And he looked up at him and said, well, teacher, I'm doing the lesson, putting colors together here for two-toning cars. The teacher shook his head and he says, you know, that will never work. Nobody ever is going to want a car that's colored together, blue and green. You cannot do that. Mr. Thomas looked at him and he said, well, teacher, would you follow me a second? And with that, he pushed his chair back, got up. The teacher and the rest of the kids are looking at him. He says, here, come here, follow me. And he took him over to the window to where you got blue sky and green trees. And he says, well, God's been doing it for eternity. And that's the kind of guy that Thomas was.
Wow.
And the second thing is, he was the type of person that had the freedom, which is a very important word today, to know that it can't be, or not to think that it can't be done. He had the freedom to think, how can it get done?
Yeah.
And I think those are great times.
Yes.
Just in closing here, I just want to point out the one picture where they picked up the car and all these guys were real happy standing in front of the trailer. And that was Dick Moore, Dick McClure, Dave Howe, Ken Witt was the one smiling, looking in the window. His sons were there for the grand opening. Dave Soloway and Norm Wright. They were all pretty happy, but I bet a year later they were all starting to wonder, what did we do? What did we do? Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I very much appreciate that you're here. I don't know if you gave us a little bio why you're so interested in cars from your family. And Ryan gave me permission to say the Dansville Car Show is on, I believe, tomorrow for all of you car junkies like me. But could you tell us how you got hooked into it? I have it in my own DNA. My dad owned a little Isetta for several years.
Well, unfortunately, I've always been interested in antiques, older things, technology. My whole life I've been a pilot. I sold when I was 16 years old, so love old airplanes. But I've always liked old cars too, you know. And it's pretty much it. It's just an interest. And my son, you know, when he was little, we'd take a road trip. And I'd like, oh brother, here comes a junkyard. Oh, stop! Cars, cars! We'd have to stop and walk around, like, you know. And it's amazing how things get scrapped. It's just amazing, and I hate to see some of the things. You can't save everything, there's no doubt about it. But, like this almost disappeared, and It was, yes, ma'am.
What else did you say about the rocket car?
Pardon me?
So what else did you say about the rocket car?
What's that?
So what else did you say about the rocket car?
Oh, okay. You wanted to say something? What's that?
What else did you say about it?
Oh.
How heavy it was.
Oh. I can't say enough about it, that's all, so.
Didn't that, have like a
What
gravity
else you said about the
feed
rocket
fuel
car?
system in it?
What?
A gravity feed fuel system?
Gravity feed fuel system?
Yes,
Yeah.
Yeah,
yes.
because I remember hearing a story about Mrs. Thomas going on the railroad tracks and somehow it stalled because it went up where the fuel was being fed to the engine.
You hear so many stories, you know,
Yeah,
it's
that's
just
something I heard.
And apparently that was the last day, or that week or whatever, that was the last time that it was on the road. Because when Charlie got home, he got his ear full. So they ended, that's why, I don't know who bought it after that, but he had it for sale after that.
Where was the fuel tank at?
All right, thank you very much.
Thank God.
Well, thank you again, Bob, for the
Thank you.
presentation. Thank you, everybody, for coming again.
I can't help it, I keep looking at the card, I keep thinking of Superman cartoon way back. It seems like that kind of a car was in someone's cartoon. Is there any?
I wouldn't know.
I'm telling you, that old
That was the
30s
des-
Superman movie cartoon.
That was the design, I remember the Hudson Hornet.
Show them the theater.
So just a quick PSA of everything coming up for the next month. Next week, so every first Wednesday of each month, we're gonna be having extended hours. So we'll be open from 5 to 8 as well, besides our regular 10 to 4 hours. So if you wanna stop by in the evening, we can do that. We have trivia on September 12th with the local Daughters of the American Revolution chapter for Constitution Week on the Constitution. If you want to come and stop by that. And we have a guest speaker coming up on the 18th who will be talking about the Richardson Olmsted Complex in Buffalo. And its past, present, and future uses. And our next Java with Joe will be the 26th of September, and Tom Tiefel, who is the Bergen historian, will be talking about Lieutenant Thomas Dean of Bergen, who was part of the 8th New York Heavy Artillery and was in a lot of the major battles. And so those are just a few of the things coming up. There's more things on our calendar. If you're interested, check out our website, check out Facebook, just give us a call, we'll fill you all in. And the best way to stay informed, though, is if you're not a member, is to become a member, and you'll get all this every single week, and you don't have to look for it, it'll come right to you. So thank you, everybody. Take a donut, take some more coffee, and we'll see you the next time.